We'll start off our discussion of voice over IP by looking at all of the different things somebody could mean when they say voice over IP. And this is how it all got started. People talking to each other over the internet through their computers. And for lack of a better term, I call this the hobbyist scenario. Now what we need for this is two people, both with an internet connection, and they have to have a sound card in their computers and a microphone and speakers plugged into the sound card. And the idea is that one person speaks into the microphone, which is plugged into the sound card, and the sound card does the analog to digital conversion. And then what comes out of the sound card goes into a piece of application software. And originally these were all proprietary, like web phone software. And this would do some coding and packaging and take the coded speech and put it in IP packets. And then we would give that to the IP protocol stack running on the computer, which is part of Windows now. And the IP protocol stack in Windows would send those IP packets to the internet service provider, who would then relay them across the internet to somebody who was doing the same thing on the other side. And at the other end of the story, we'd have the user receiving the IP packets into their IP protocol stack on their computer, and then these would be directed to the web phone application software, which would then turn it back into a stream of bits and give it to the sound card on the far end computer, which would do the digital to analog conversion. You can get this all set up and working. Both people would need the same web phone application software, and since it's proprietary, not standards-based, you'd need the same version of the same web phone software. But with an internet connection and the software, you can set it up, and I did this. The first problem I ran into then is, how do you find out what the other person's network address is? Because there are no directory services. On the public switch telephone network, if you want to make a connection across the network to somebody else and you don't know what their network address is, well, you dial 411, or you look in a book and there's a directory cross-referenced by last name and address, and you can find out what their network address is, their phone number. But when we're doing voice over IP with these proprietary web phone software applications, they did have some rudimentary directory services where you would sort of register onto a server and then they would have a list and you could see other people's IP addresses. But generally speaking, if you wanted to call your mom wouldn't have already registered on there. There would only be people you didn't know. So I tried this, and I was able to connect to somebody in France and somebody in Tokyo. Now, I didn't know them, so the only things that we could discuss were what time was it where they were, and what was the weather like. And after we finished that, there wasn't a whole lot more to discuss, so we'd break the connection and connect randomly to somebody else. The reason why I call this the hobbyist scenario is that this takes a commitment in terms of understanding technology and getting it all set up. And then the results, well, as far as voice quality goes, it was hit or miss. Sometimes you could understand what the other person was saying fine, sometimes you couldn't. A lot of times you ended up having to resort to a half duplex mode of communications, where first you talk and then you have to wait and then they talk. Even though the communications was in theory in both directions at the same time, that was just in theory. The thing to keep in mind here is that there are no guarantees as to quality of service over the internet. You might try to send an IP packet to somebody, but there are no guarantees that it's going to get there, or when, or how often that's going to happen. And if you're talking to somebody in Tokyo, well, who knows what circuits that's actually running over. But this is free. Now, the reason why I call this the hobbyist scenario is because my aunt would never be able to get this working. She's a very nice person, but her VCR flashes 12. I've showed her how to set the clock on her VCR. I've tried to talk her through it on the telephone. I've even left the manual creased open to that page on top of the VCR. But no, her VCR flashes 12. There's no way that my aunt could ever get this working. I would claim it would take the same level of commitment to get this working as it would to get ham radio working. Now, there's nothing wrong with ham radio, but that's a commitment in terms of knowledge and technical ability. But this was free, and we saw newspaper articles and cover stories in Byte magazine trumpeting the end of long distance and how we'd all be talking through our computers over the internet within 5 years, and on and on and on. Well, maybe we will be, maybe we won't. We're certainly going to look at all of the different flavors of voice over IP, but this is the one that got it all started. Now today you can do this, of course, still, and we're starting to have standards-based communications, and we're going to certainly talk about standards as we go through the course. And the companies that were trying to sell proprietary application software to do this, like Webphone, which was at first free, then they started trying to charge $40 to download it, and not too many people were willing to pay the $40. This is mutated now into an add-on onto those instant messaging programs like Yahoo Instant Messaging, and of course MSN and AOL are supporting it as well. So you can set up a little camera if you want to do video, and you can set up a speaker and microphones, and you can do communications in IP packets over the internet. But you have no idea what quality you're going to end up with. Doing long-distance telephony over the internet via cable TV has attracted a lot of attention recently. Comcast and Cox both announced that they were going to do this, and then of course the telephone companies had to jump in and say, "Me too." Now let's take a bit of a closer look at this one and try to understand what the reality is behind all of the hype. What has to happen here is that one user has a high-speed connection to the internet, a broadband connection. This could be a cable modem or it could be DSL. Now they want to plug a regular telephone onto this in order to be able to do long distance over the internet. So to do that we need an adapter at the customer, and this is a little box that would allow you to plug on one side a telephone supporting plain ordinary telephone service, POT, so analog telephony, just any phone you could buy at Walmart. And on the other side, this adapter would be spitting out IP packets that would then go into the cable modem or DSL modem to be transported across this internet service provider's